All right, it has been nearly 3 weeks since the brutal stabbings of 4 University of Idaho students and absolutely no suspects that we know of. And look, it is cliche to say there are more questions than there are answers. That's not unusual in a developing investigation, but what is unusual is that something so raw and so driven by rage, multiple stabbings, defensive wounds, 4 different people, and yet there is no suggestion of any kind of lead that at least has been made public. We have NewsNation reporter Brian Enton, we have FBI profiler Andrew Bringuel, and world-renowned forensic scientist whom I have been relying on for case studies for decades, Dr. Larry Kobylinski. It's good to have each and all, and as I said, Brian, weigh in whenever you want. Bringuel, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, Chris?
Yes. So one fact question and then a question initially just about type. The fact question is 4 different people murdered, defensive wounds. What about sound? You know, if you have defensive wounds and you have multiple stabbings and you have people on 2 different floors, how hard is it to do that with no real noise happening?
Well, it's nearly impossible to kill someone with a knife without eliciting some kind of response from the victim. The victims don't go quietly in the night, even if you're asleep. The first stab wound is not likely to be fatal. And so it's very likely that one or more of the victims were screaming, fighting back, as has been reported in the open source information, that at least a couple had defensive wounds. And the question then becomes, why didn't those victims' cries, why weren't they heard on the first floor? A interview that I read of a previous roommate who was on the first floor said it was very difficult in this house because of acoustics to listen or hear anybody on the 2nd or 3rd floor unless they were playing the television very loud. It's also interesting that there was a dog in the home, and the dog didn't alert on this individual, and the dog was not harmed either.
Hey, Brian, is there a suggestion of how the guy got in the house?
No, we just know that there was no forced entry, but it's interesting what the doctor there just said about the dog. I just heard from Kaylee's parents. They obviously know the dog very well. They said the dog is not a barker, which a lot of people have wondered about. The dog would never bark. The dog was not aggressive, and they say likely the dog just went and hid. So these questions about why the dog didn't attack or make a lot of noise, they say the dog would have never done that. That wasn't the dog's personality.
Also, Bringuel, for me, Andrew, me referring to this as a guy, does that have to be a foregone conclusion, or could it have been a female?
No, I think you mentioned the other night, you know, why I said guy. I think the impulse is that because of the brutality and force that was used in this crime, and the type of crime that was committed with the brutality that it had, that it was a male. And in fact, most of these types of attacks are male-driven. So the assumption is it's male. But you did an excellent job earlier talking about the parallel theories, one being a potential serial killer and one being a targeted attack from someone that the victims possibly knew. And I think that going back to the earlier statements of the police, my belief.
Hey, thank you for watching. Please go to newsnationnow.com, newsnationnow.com, and you can find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button down below. Then you will get more of NewsNation's fact-driven coverage.